I'm Zach Johnson.
I'm Mitchell Hora.
And this is the Fieldwork Podcast.
We're back, and we got some guests here with us in the studio. We're talking with Bryan and Laura Biegler, and so I don't screw it up, I'll let them kind of introduce themselves and whatnot, and we'll kind of jump into it, but basically just being able to open up conversation, have some dialogue about what's going on the farm. This podcast is for other row crop farmers also, just like we are. So if we can open up, just some of that dialogue on what you guys have seen, what you guys have learned, both, unveiling some of the good things that have happened and some of the issues that we've all have ran into along the way. So Bryan and Lauren, thanks for coming in, and I'll let you just introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Bryan Biegler from Southwest Minnesota. Raised corn and soybeans down there and trying to raise 3 kids at the same time, which is always a full-time job, and also involved with the state Minnesota Corn Growers Association.
I live with Bryan and also trying to raise our 3 kids is probably been my full-time job for quite a while now, but originally from central Iowa, grew up on a farm and went to school at Iowa State and have worked in agriculture, and now we live on Bryan's family farm in Southwest Minnesota.
So that's why Lauren and I are friends, because we're both from Iowa.
That's right.
You got that in common.
Yeah, we got that in common.
This is why Bryan and I are friends.
Yeah,
that's right. We won't hold it against them, too.
Yeah, that's all right.
So on this episode, what we really want to talk about is getting stakeholders on board. And when you want to change your practices or looking at doing things differently, whether it's with conservation practices or tillage practices, which you guys have a lot of experience with, tell us a little bit about the challenges and some of the changes that you guys have made and some of the challenges that have come with that as far as getting some of the other people involved in your operation on board with some of those changes.
About 7 years ago, I decided to make a change into strip tillage and no tilling and cover crops. I had been all conventional tillage before that. One of the first things to do was to go in and start talking to my landlords and see if they were going to be okay with that, for me to implement that onto their farms. Luckily, most of them were all pretty receptive about it and were interested in it and had a lot of questions, of course, about it. But that went pretty well. They were all on board with it and were interested to see how it happened. My agronomist, he was the next one to kind of talk to about it. He was pretty skeptical about it, had a lot of questions about it, so I talked to him about it and just kind of told him the direction I wanted to go. And so he was interested in it, so we got going on it, and he watched what was happening. So now he's actually doing some of the stuff on some of the ground that he has now, and so he has a lot of his people other customers that he works with, and it's asked a lot of questions too. So the biggest one was just neighbors. Get a lot of weird looks from the neighbors when you're trying to when you're doing this, and you're doing it pretty much the opposite of what everybody else is trying to do. So that's I think they're starting to see that I've been in it long enough now that they're seeing that it's working. I haven't gone broke yet, and it's still staying with it and stuff. So there might be something to it. So I'm starting to get a lot more questions about it now.
So Lauren, you were kind of there throughout this whole process when this started 7 years ago. What was some of your take, as you guys were going about this process, especially looking at some of the skepticism and some of the naysayers, that you guys were really going out kind of on a limb, it sounds like. What was some of the feedback that you saw?
Yeah. I mean, peer pressure is real, right? I mean, we live in a community of people, and not that you're farming to please other people, but I mean, that's part of the equation too. So it wasn't as big of when he said I encouraged him. I think growing up in Iowa on our farm, my dad was always very conservation minded. So it was always like background music in my life. It was kind of, he wasn't afraid to try something new and different growing up. So I feel like I was kind of like, well, what's the big deal? Like, just try it. Like, if you think this is the direction we need to go. And my dad was really supportive and was a good source of information. And I guess I just kind of, I'm not from the area, so it's easier for me to be, who cares what anybody else thinks? Why not? Just try it. If you think this is the direction we need to go, then let's do it. I don't see what the big issue is. So it was easier for me, to encourage him to take that leap.
So that, that's kind of my initial takeaway was you said 7 years ago, you decided, hey, let's look at doing something a little bit different. I think a lot of people, are at that spot where we're seeing, okay, there's a lot of different options out here, but I don't know what are the best options. And none of my neighbors really are maybe figuring it out, or some of the ones who are trying to maybe do something different, they're the hippies,
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the weird one that's out there trying to do something different and screwing it up, and all your neighbors are watching if you're trying something different. What, do you have something specific that you can kind of point to say, that's when I decided, let's at least try something different or try to explore what are the next steps going to be? Is there kind of that defining moment or not really?
I think a lot of it has to do with personality, quite honestly. I mean, there's some people that are information seekers. Bryan is like an information seeker. Like, he researches things almost to the point of being annoying to me, but it's it's always that's a good thing. The more information you have, the better. So there's always that group of people that, when you talk about the early adopters and that are information seekers and seeking out best practices. And it's so much easier now with the world of social media to find people that are doing it and finding the things that they're doing, things that are working, things that haven't worked. And just to have that conversation and that feedback from other people, I think has been really valuable and important.
Yeah, maybe dig into that a little bit. We were talking about that before we turned on the recording button, about social media and whatnot. And how did that kind of play a role? Obviously, 7 years ago, that probably wasn't in the cards all that much. As far as on like Facebook and the groups and whatnot, and maybe Twitter and whatnot, that's now really kind of taken off. But did that have much of a play at that point, or more so just more recently?
It did some. There was some couple groups that I found on like Facebook and that I'd followed and got involved with them and was able to ask them questions. And then a lot of it was just going to meetings that are around in the area. The North Dakota State and Minnesota, they got that tillage conference that they got going, and had gone to that and got a lot of good information there, and just a bunch of different meetings. I got involved with the Soil Health Partnership, and so just having that network of people to be able to talk to and ask questions. And I probably spent 3-4 years just asking questions and going to different meetings and stuff and trying to get a base of what I wanted to do and try to avoid some of the big hiccups with everything.
What would you say? I'm curious, what's the percentage that you would guess of conventional tillage in your area?
At 90, at least 90%.
It is that much.
I would guess. In the county where we're at, I would say, let's see, 1, 2, 3, maybe a handful of us doing strip till. There's more guys that are looking into it. The cover crops, each year it seems like it's getting a little bit more of that. Guys are interested in looking into it and stuff. So it's not a real high percentage right now, but I think this spring will be interesting to see, because we didn't. The guys that do
the tillage got done.
Yeah. So I think it's a good opportunity for guys that are looking at maybe trying something to maybe try some, especially some no-tilling or even a little strip tilling.
Kind of by default here.
Yeah.
Huh. Now, it's interesting to be able to have some of that tied in with the different geographies and whatnot, that we kind of represent a variety of different areas. And, that I always kind of say, it's the culture in that area too. And like the culture there is very traditional. It sounds like, and even, strip tilling and trying to, make some strategic changes and whatnot, but it's still not like we see some of these guys who are really into conservation are way out. I've been doing this for 20 or more years. There's still a long path ahead to be able to even attempt to do what some of those guys are doing.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a culture. I mean, guys are used to it. This is what we've always done. It's what's always worked. And to make that change, when I did it, I had the opportunity to work for me. Markets were a lot higher price at the time. We were in a little bit drier pattern, so it's kind of easier to implement some of the stuff in. Now we're gotten, definitely had a lot more moisture in the last couple of years in the springs and all through fall. And so it's been a little bit tougher probably to implement some of that stuff in. And it's definitely it's nothing that you go out one time and if it doesn't work, you just kind of give it up. I mean, the guys are going to see that and just like, well, it ain't going to work. It takes a process. It takes a few years to kind of get everything up and going. And when margins are tight, it's hard to absorb that, especially if you have a mishap in it.
Yeah, what's some of that process looked like, especially now, that there's some other neighbors that are kind of coming on board too. How has that relationship or that little group kind of been? Has that been something that's been a positive piece along the way or not really a factor?
I mean, for local wise, yeah, there's been definitely more people have asking about it, and I think the meetings that we've been going to around the areas, more people have been attending and asking the questions about it and stuff. So I think, I mean, you can't open up a magazine now talking about soil health.
Yeah, it's
or
all over the place.
That's the big hot thing right now. And the new farm bill, they got some extra things in there to help with getting people interested in it and help along with that. So definitely it's starting to grow.
Sounds like even I haven't been able to look into it, but even just in the recent budgets and whatnot coming out of DC, sounds like something along the lines of $240 million or something like that allocated to conservation. So there's a big focus on it. But to me, we have to have people that are there saying, hey, here's me, here's what I'm trying to do. You can come in and support my efforts. Yeah. And we can allocate your funding to where it's going to best be used.
It's nice to give them a little funding to try. I think we've had quite a few. Bryan does custom cover crop application, and people try it, or he's done custom strip tillage for them also. And they do it for a year, and you think, oh, there wasn't much of a difference, or whether it be because of the weather that year or whatever, that there wasn't much of a difference, and then they go back to what they were doing the next year, and just that perseverance of it being a long-term game versus just trying it 1 year, and if there's some money behind that, it'd be nice to help overcome some of that barrier.
Right.
I think that would be,
because there definitely is some out-of-pocket expense. So you got
absolutely.
You do it. I mean, for me, when I started strip tilling, my dad, he wasn't quite on board with it yet. Was wondering what the heck I was doing here. So my strip till bar, I bought that out of my pocket because we wanted to keep all the other machinery, so we had it just in case it flops. Yep. So, it was a big chunk of change out of your pocket. I think my first strip till, it was $100,000 plus for a bar by the time you get something together, and so that definitely factors into things a little bit.
So then you kind of have to make it work.
Yeah.
Or else you're gonna, you can flip it and maybe make some of that money back, but probably not the whole chunk. So really try. My question along those lines then is, as you were implementing strip till or just change of process, like we said, some of the big benefits don't necessarily come right away. But what were some of the other things that you were seeing along the way that made you want to keep on going?
Well, the biggest thing was just the erosion was cut way down on it. That was one of the big stepping points to get me to go into it. Is that one spring I just got done planting a field, and the next day we had a 3-inch rain in about an hour. And I was at the point where it was either I was going to have to tear the field up. It was rutted so bad. It was either I tear the thing up, replant it, and now we're just going to let it go. And it was a slow process combining because we got ruts out there, about a foot deep and about a foot wide, and bouncing through with everything with the combine and the cart. So we leveled it all off that fall. I hit it with a vertical till after I ripped it, got it smooth. Plant it next spring without doing anything, and that was kind of the start on it. And then I had a neighbor that I've been talking to. He had been strip tilling and ridge tilling for about 25 years, so he was a good resource for me. And I had him do a few acres for me of strip tilling, and I liked it and went off from there.
Build from there.
Yeah.
Lauren, you've got some stories and some situations where you had to deal with some people that you maybe had to convince or deal with as far as changing your practices on your field. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those situations?
I had the pleasure of working with a number of agronomists and seed dealers from a number of districts across the country, and still keep in touch with a number of them. And one of my agronomists, I told him kind of what we were thinking about doing, and just kind of the same typical reaction. He, what are you talking about? You guys are crazy. You're going to turn into one of those hippie farmers or whatever he had, whatever choice phrase he used. But, talking to him about, why? This is why we're thinking about doing it. And it was really striking to me. And even talking to some other large seed dealers, when I think about like the number of acres that these people influence and the number of people they talk to, it was really striking to me, like that they didn't, I don't want to say, I don't know how to say this without making them sound like because they're very intelligent people, but I just don't think soil health has ever been something that they've ever been taught. They learn about genetics and corn and soybeans and chemicals and those sorts of things, but soil health really, and the principles behind that and the reasons for doing that, I think are something that until recently people don't receive a lot of education about or talk about very often. So I felt like he didn't quite get why we would want to be doing that. It was very striking to me because I thought he's been in the industry a long time. Very intelligent man, obviously, but just the principles behind soil health, the fact that he didn't, quite get what we were getting at or why we were wanting to do it, that was striking to me. And a number of people I've talked to, that have been in the industry a long time, working in it a long time, just don't.
Yeah, that's huge if that's one of your most trusted advisors right there. And if
Right.
you're getting naysaying from one of your most trusted go-to people, it's hard to be able to go beyond that, even to the next step, to
Right.
say, hey, I feel confident, that the guy that I've been working with for a long time has got my back.
Right.
And we're going to work together on this. So now let's go to the next people to get them on board also and join the team. If you have pushback from the first person trying to get on the team,
Right.
it's tough to go get the other ones.
Right.
So that's almost shocking to me because I know in my personal situation, our county has got to be 99.5% conventional tillage. I mean, there is almost zero no-till. And the independent agronomist that I work with actually would love it if we would go strip till, no-till, cover crop and figure something out. He would love to work with guys that want to do that, but there's nobody that
Willing.
wants to try that. Yeah. So in my personal situation, it's almost the opposite. I mean, the agronomist would love to see us try some strip till stuff, but you just don't have willing parties out there that want to do much with it. Now we've got some guys that will run some test strips. I do have one neighbor, I guess, that does do a good amount of strip tillage, but in our situation, it's almost the opposite. I don't know. Do you guys think that it's common what Lauren's talking about here? Do you think it's more common that way to have the agronomists actually lean the opposite direction?
I definitely think so.
I think so. I think a lot of it's just the education side. They just don't know. I mean, they're so used to the other side of it yet, just the conventional, and they haven't seen the exposure to the other side yet. And then,
I think it's part of the culture, that
Yeah.
you have
That's
the
what I was
farmer
just gonna
culture, but then you have the agronomist culture, and whether that agronomist be an independent or through an ag retailer or whatever it may be, it doesn't really matter that much. That they have to be part of the culture too, and they're probably going to be a fit in that natural culture. Now, maybe they are going to be the one to kind of lead the pack and go out and say, hey, let's do something a little bit different here for those who want to try something different. Just like there has to be farmers that say, hey, let's go and try something a little different. We're seeing some opportunity. We're trying to learn from other people, and let's go and experiment and do something a little bit new. My worry with some of that being, that we brought up funding and whatnot, and the funding channels that the government is seeing as the number one go-to is those ag retailer agronomists and whatnot, and independents and whatnot too. But my point being, in trying to allocate funding and whatnot back through the pipeline, if you're going from the government to the ag retailer or whatever, the agronomist, and there's a bottleneck at the agronomy level to get it to the farmer, then that is an issue also. And then same thing, if the farmer is trying to go to their local NRCS office to be able to get some help, to get some funding, and then they're trying to implement it, and their agronomist is coming back saying, we better put the brakes on this one, then the funding could be there, and then they, it kind of backs off at that point.
Well, I don't see a lot of, from a co-op perspective, one of our hopes for all this was, can we eventually be able to reduce fertilizer, those sorts of things. Well, if that goes against their
Goes
profit
against the mantra of trying to
objectives,
sell
their
fertilizer.
bottom
If you
line, are they going to be ones to really advocate and push for this? And my thing is, things change. So does your business model need to evolve with that? Do you need to start selling cover crops? Do your business models need to change to adapt?
I think we're finally seeing some of that coming about. that I've got some interesting view into a little bit of that. So I think there's some change coming, but those are huge ships to try to turn. And I think there's smaller, maybe local companies and whatnot, or smaller retailers or smaller agronomy kind of firms that are able to change a little quicker. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a big ship here. And that, we kind of talked about that before, that in order to implement conservation at scale into U.S. agriculture, that is a big process.
Yeah.
Wow.
Huge.
Yeah, if you want to get a blank stare, I went in and talked to my local retailer about it when I was going to get into it, and they're like, yeah, hopefully someday I can start reducing fertilizer and reduce chemical usage and stuff, and they just...
Like, why would you want to
what?
do that?
Why? So, getting them on board, it's going to probably be is going to be a big process there.
So we've talked a little bit about the economics of it. And a question that I have is, you say you started this around 7 years ago. So if I back up to 2012 and think about what the corn prices were back then, the corn and soybean prices and what we had going on there, you mentioned it was dry, 2012, we know that. What would be some of the challenges now getting into this that how would it be different for you to start this now as opposed to what it was like 7 years ago?
Well, one of the biggest things I think would be just with the wetter pattern that we're in right now. I feel my soil structure is set up so much different. Like the last couple of falls, we've had guys have gone out, all the neighbors, they're out getting their combine stuck, the grain cart stuck and everything, and I've been able to sail right straight through everything. I haven't had left a rut in a field. So, I mean, if I was trying to start right now, and that it takes that time for that soil structure to set up, and
Mm-hmm.
probably been looking at 3 years at least before it starts getting turned over a little bit. All of a sudden you start leaving ruts, and you got to come back out, try to level everything off and everything. That can be kind of a little bit of a challenge there. So, and just the no-tilling. In spring you want to get planting, you want the soil dried out some, and if it's going to be wetter, it's going to be harder to get in there and get planting. The last thing you want to do when it's sunny out is be sitting there waiting for your field to dry out.
Right.
You want to be going.
Right. So you mentioned that it takes, roughly, you think, 3 years to get that good soil structure kind of changed over.
Yeah.
What does a person do for 3 years there while you're waiting for that soil to change over, while you're, especially in a time like now when we're fighting the economics of what we're up against right now in agriculture? And maybe Mitchell has some thoughts on this as well, as far as how to kind of get through some of that.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough one to. You got to consider that. Perseverance, I guess. You got to do it and just have your mind made up that you're going to try to work through it. There's ways you can kind of get. Like if there would be a spot out there, you just got to go out and work that little spot down and get that leveled off.
But I don't think we ever saw a crop failure in
No.
those 3 years. I mean, we saw some benefits pretty quickly. I mean, every year we kind of fully realize a little bit more, but I think it's important to talk about that most of the time, trying to, as you're transitioning through this and soil is transitioning, you're not most of the time not going to have some kind of crop failure, or you're not even going to have
in a
that.
strip till, you guys were kind of going to a strip till system though too,
Yeah.
where you still have that kind of leveled off seed bed and
Yeah.
whatnot, but it's just in a more narrow area.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so did you guys have like the RTK GPS and that kind of stuff set up ahead of time though too? That'd be another
Yeah, I had
expense.
all my. I've been set up with that for quite a few years now. The RTK, I had that all years before that. So I was had all my guidance lines and everything all set up, so I was able to just transfer them right in and keep going with stuff. So it wasn't too bad to get into it. We've never, like she said, we never have had a crop failure on anything. My yields have always been right with everybody, and I don't know, I haven't got no official numbers yet, but last fall with everything, I think my yields are going to be running, especially on corn, probably going to be 15 to 20 above the county average.
Mm-hmm.
So
And last year
feel
was a
pretty
year
good.
that
we were wet.
that all of this work has shined, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a lot of years where you
That's
you
what I
may
hear
not
about
look a
all the
lot of
time.
different from your neighbors, but
Yeah, a lot of
last
times
fall it
the
really.
guys that I talk to that are really into this, they say when all their neighbors are having a good year, they're right there with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when the neighbors are having a bad year that they're able to be more resilient and their soils are built up and they're able to withstand, whether that be it's too dry and my soils, though, with better structure and built organic matter and better infiltration, I'm holding more of that water. Yeah. Or if it's too wet, I've got the structure, I've got the infiltration to be able to get that water down and get that water held and dispersed into the soil versus trying to run off the top or pond.
It helps with consistency, I think, from year to year. It helps withstand some of those weather challenges and extremes a little bit better.
How much drain tile do you guys have under your fields?
Oh, we have a fair amount.
And it was there before you started this?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was some there. We've added some in I've added some into some fields. There's definitely can use some more in spots. But
sure.
I also feel like some spots that have had issues with in the past, they've kind of gone away.
You think the soil structure changed enough that some of those spots opened up and allowed the filtration?
Yeah, especially with implementing cover crops into it in those spots. It just helps. You get some of those things that you got such a big root that gets down 5-6 feet, they'll crack that ground open and give water channels for it to go through. And
sure.
I had one farm. The thing was flooding out on me all the time. Then all of a sudden it flooded out, so I went in and I put a cover crop into it after it flooded. And a couple years after that, for about 3 years after that, I never had the thing flood out on me. And we've kept the moisture on and stuff, but I contributed to that helped it out a lot.
Yeah. And it's hard to put a dollar figure on some of that stuff too, as far as being able to kind of tell that story and whatnot, or putting a dollar figure on not getting stuck. Because a lot of times, I think as farmers, we don't do a very good job of associating our time with the dollar figure all that much, and we don't put a good value on our own time.
Mm-hmm.
So
we've said all along and that comes back too to I think another stakeholder that is important in this whole journey would be lenders. Mm-hmm. I think you kind of brought our banker, our ag loan person along too, and when you're in a situation where like the economics are like they are at this point, where we had the ability to take that risk just because of commodity prices at the time we made the switch. But now if somebody wants to do that, is your lender going to be willing to a loan for a new piece of equipment? But that's another person to educate and bring along on the journey too, because it does tie back to the economics a little bit. And that's definitely another person. And we've always said there's no back to time, back to everything. It's hard to quantify, but there isn't a line on your balance sheet for soil health. But there's definitely like some sort of monetary value there, even though it's a lot of little things that kind of flow into that. But
when you talk about your lender, was your lender, he or she, were they on board?
I think he was another one that thought you were crazy.
Yeah, they were kind of wondering what was going on. Why? They're looking up at front at the numbers at first, but once I explained to them, and it was easier to get them to come on board a little bit just with the grain markets. We took the numbers into him and showed it to him, and he's like, well, okay. And so, but it was like everybody else, they're skeptical about it.
Is this something where you guys went all in, or did you start with 40 acres or an 80 or something like that, or did you decide I'm going strip till next year?
I did 60 acres. Next year I went all in.
60 acres, and that first year was 60 acres was enough to convince you that you were going all in.
Yeah.
So now that you've got 7 years of experience with this is a question I have. Would anybody be able to talk you back into conventional tillage?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
That simple.
That's absolutely not.
That's crazy. How soon do you think it would have been along the journey when that became your answer?
Oh, that was that first year. You did
After
that
60
infiltration
acres.
test.
Yeah.
You noticed a huge difference right away.
It's gotten more and more. Each year has gotten easier for me to give that answer.
Yeah.
I'll admit every time I go out and plant in the spring, I go plant in that strip. And it's like, hope it works, hope it comes up. And then all of a sudden it pops up like, okay, we're golden, we're good to go. But I know it's going to work every year, but it's still, you see all the neighbors the neighbors, they're running out with the field cultivator and I'm going with the planter.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, I'm missing a piece here, but no, I would. I've been very happy, very very pleased with how everything's been working, and I would not go back.
Well, that's been a big benefit for us too. When you talk about a challenge that a lot of farmers facing is labor. We were finally lucky enough. We looked for a long time for a full-time person when his dad was kind of wanting to be done and kind of over the technology part of it and that sort of thing. That we needed a full-time person, and it's hard to find somebody that's good and will show up to work every day and is conscientious. And luckily, we were able to find somebody that's been a really good fit, but it's reduced our need for labor quite a bit too. We just don't have as many machines that need to
Not as
run,
many
and
passes across the
not as
field.
many
Yeah.
passes, and
It's
been a big benefit.
Everybody always says we don't make as many passes, which we might have maybe one, maybe two less, but more efficient passes.
Sure.
Instead of running with the field cultivator to take out your weeds or something like that, I'm running across with the sprayer, take the weeds out. So, 120-foot boom, it takes you no time at all. Get 100 acres done in about 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Fertilizer, I'm doing all my tillage and fertilizer in one
All in one
pass.
pass.
I don't have to worry about the co-op getting out there to doing stuff. So it's a lot of different efficiencies along the way there that you don't fully see right off the bat.
Do you see some ability, how do we go about quantifying some of that or putting some of the economics behind it? Have you guys looked into that all that much?
Well, I have some. By the time I can't remember the numbers off my head. I had that stuff all figured out one time. Just on my figuring the differences in running the field cultivator and running a sprayer. What did they figure on field cultivator is like $10 an acre, and running sprayer, is like $5. So all of a sudden you got $5 an acre savings there, and fuel savings has just been huge for me. And I take out when we used to run the Ripper 160 acres. It's 300 gallons, just about 300 gallons of fuel to run that thing. Well, now 160 acres, it takes me maybe half a tank. I got maybe I run half a gallon an acre when I'm doing strip tilling. When I was running chisel plow or Ripper, we're running anywhere a gallon and a half to 2 gallons. So, it's little savings, but after a
Those
while,
little pieces add up.
they add
It's
up to big
aggregate
ones.
up to a pretty big savings, especially over the years. When you think about even paying back equipment or that sort of thing, those savings add up over the years.
My question, I guess, is, in you guys' view, what needs to happen in order to implement conservation, or in order to make sure that everybody is doing their part to impact the environment in a beneficial manner, in order to maintain the family farm and whatnot too? What if you guys were to implement the system, what would it look like in your eyes?
That's a good one.
Zach, you
Notice how
probably
empty his eyes are.
I think, this is just my opinion, and it may be popular and it might not. But in some sense, I think, farmers, it's been a tough road for a number of years now. And I think in a little bit of, this is going to sound terrible.
We can edit it.
Okay, that's good. You can edit it. Don't use this if you don't want to use it. But I think some people have lost that greater good mindset for pure survival, right? Like some farms are just making it year to year, and that's what they have to do. But at some point, you have to think about, we're making these changes for the long term. When you talk about culture, agriculture is one where we talk a lot about, how many generations. It's a big point of pride, and rightfully so. But we also we've done a lot of damage to some of our soils and that sort of thing. And I think in a sense it can be repaired. We can do a little bit of work to improve going forward, but I think that's sometimes an end goal that in the environment we're in gets lost a little bit, is that, we have a really long-term game here. If you want it to go 5 more generations, then maybe we need to start looking at this differently. When your father and grandfather were ripping and disking and even moldboard plowing back all those years, they were doing the best that they knew how to do with the information they had,
Right.
and the tools that they had. And the fact is now we have a lot of information. Sometimes I think almost too much. We get information like overload.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But now we have the ability to do things better, and it's just changing that mindset a little bit. I think that this is really a long-term game, and if we, like I said, do want it to go 5 more generations, is what we're doing now, is our topsoil going to be there? Is it going to be in the shape that it needs to be in if we want it to be 5 more generations in the family?
Technology's been a game changer on it, really. I mean, it's helped out so much to being able to implement a lot of this stuff. It's being able to find the information on it, and just the RTK I plant green into my cover crops. I mean, I got cereal rye out there. It's 3-4 feet tall. Mm-hmm. There's no way you're going to see where you're supposed to be going.
Yeah.
Except hit the button and hope it takes you straight. One of the biggest things, it's kind of seems kind of odd on it maybe, but I haven't been farming that long. I'm 47 years old, and I started back in 92. Did all the conventional stuff, was actually kind of the monotony of it. Just every year, just do the same thing over and over, doing it. It's gotten kind of fun again for me. Because now with all the different stuff that we're trying, always trying to see, what cover crop mix are we going to use now to try to help with this thing or that, and just getting the tillage done. And then we've gotten with all the custom work that with the strip tilling and cover crop seeding, just getting out and just meeting the neighbors and being able to talk to them and stuff like that. So that's been kind of put a little bit of fun back into it.
Kind of bring that sense of community too, you know, that you're kind of building.
I think those are good points. As farmers, we always want to try and do better.
Yeah.
And now you brought up the point of technology, and information is way more available. So we've got the information, we've got the technology, but unfortunately, like you said, we're kind of stuck in a spot right now with agriculture, and I think it's a worldwide thing, but especially here in the Midwest where it's not easy times.
Yeah.
It's been since 7 years ago when you guys started this whole thing, things have changed a lot.
Yep.
And so like you said, there's a lot of farmers out there that are just hang on, just survive, and just do the best we can to get a good crop next year, because this thing will hopefully turn around someday.
Absolutely.
And then maybe at that point things will change. Maybe people will be more open to trying to get into some of this stuff. I don't know, but we're in a strange spot right now as far as that goes.
And that's where we're not naive to the fact that the timing for us was unbelievable.
Sure.
And just telling somebody they need to do X, Y, or Z and jump right in is not realistic. I think just pick one field or even part of one field and have, if you need to hire somebody to custom strip till it, maybe there are some other savings there if you're not doing the tillage pass that will allow you to help pay for that, but just dabble a little bit, small changes.
A lot of people don't like to do it, but the government programs, the CSP programs and the EQIP programs, and they are good programs to help to absorb some of that cost up there if you are interested in trying it. It's probably one of the best ways, especially right now with the prices down, to try to get into it, and if you are interested in trying any of it.
Yeah. I've talked to, I've got a buddy who's out in Washington, D.C. and whatnot, and has worked in policy, and was explained to him, the process for going and signing up for CSP or just other cost share programs. If you were talking to those kind of guys, what would you tell them in order to be able to clean this stuff up or be able to make it easier to allocate some of these resources to those who want to make the change?
Well, we have been a little bit on some with being involved with the state corn and the national corn, have been talking a little bit, and I've talked to Bill Northey a little bit too about it. And it's like simplify this stuff a little bit. It can be such a process, and then every place you go to, you're getting a different answer from them, so it's hard to really know what you're supposed to be doing sometimes. So if they can get just a set pattern and simplify it a bit, and I think more guys would definitely be interested in trying to work with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's making it simple, and that I think that's why where I'm at down in Washington County, Iowa, we have a lot of cover crop down there. I think it's like 14% of the acreage is in cover crops or something like that. And when I went in there to sign up for cover crop cost share, I literally went in, said, "Hey, yep, I want to sign up for cover crops. Okay, how many acres? Write down this paper, sign right here. You're on the list." And it was the actual paperwork part is like less than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, then you have to be approved, and then there's some follow-up and whatnot that has to happen there, and you got to submit some records, but it's super easy. But we have a good group of folks in our local NRCS office who want to work with us and who are saying, hey, we know we have to make this so easy for you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of farmers, like me, don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time in our local NRCS office, even though they're there and want to help and whatnot. But a lot of guys, it's kind of just got a negative stigma to it, I think. So the easier we can make it, I definitely agree, is better.
Yeah.
Which is too bad. They're usually some really great people.
Yeah, I think definitely, really good. And I think to me that's, the whole point of all this is fostering that conversation and being able to get them involved and hearing from us as farmers, what do we want? How do we want to do things better? That there are plenty of people who are realizing, we have to figure this out. It is a long-term game. We have to figure out, what are we going to do to make strategic change and whatnot? And a lot of it's even just baby stepping and doing things a little bit better too. And like you guys have seen, how can we utilize water a little bit better and make sure that's cleaner at the end of the day than what it was? How do I utilize nutrients a little bit better? How do I improve the profitability, the resilience on my farm, so I can continue to make changes and invest in my operation and whatnot, and make sure it is around long term? I think is huge. Part of, in kind of wrapping this up here for the day, because we've had some really great conversation, but what I definitely want, what Zach and I want, is to be able to continue to foster good conversation here, and be able to kind of open it up to you guys on, if there's folks that want to be able to reach out and continue this conversation, how do they get a hold of you guys, or be able to keep in touch, or ask some follow-up questions?
Well, they can always give me a call. I don't know if you want my number or whatever, but on that we got otherwise there's we have Facebook and stuff,
Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, on Twitter, and so you can follow me on that. Sometimes I get a bunch of stuff on there, and then all of a sudden I start kind of laughs about it. But either one of them, or just reach out. And
why don't you spell that out for?
Yeah, how do we find you on Facebook and Twitter?
The Twitter is, I can't remember my handle. You have to just go in and do a search under my name for Bryan Biegler, with a Y, not an I. Then Facebook, it's the same thing. Just type in my name, and
we'll get you queued up in the notes. But so Bryan Biegler. I would have screwed up.
Yep.
There's also
I did
screw it up.
Yeah.
Got one other one on there too. Facebook. I do have it under Biegler Farms. There's one I do a little bit more, just some of the farming side on that one. So it's looking on just for that side would be a better one to go on there. So.
I think that's a key thing though. Like having, I think going for, I don't know how that would even look, but just having somebody that wants to think about it but doesn't know how to go about it, is having some sort of mentor. I mean, I think that would be
someone to have the conversations with.
Yeah, just to ask the question, feel comfortable asking the questions, or just talking through things. I mean, Bryan may not know the answer for anybody, because like we know everybody's farm is different, but
we don't either. It's
just
fine.
Nobody knows the answer. But just having somebody to feel comfortable going to, talking those conversations through, and different scenarios, and what might be the advantages and disadvantages of that, is just having somebody is really important, I think.
I've never been one to shove this down anybody's throat and say you have to do this or stuff, but if anybody wants to ask me about it, I'm more than happy to sit down and talk about it and go through it. But the last thing I want to do is push it on somebody and get somebody ticked off at me. It's
Well, Bryan and Laura Biegler, farmers from southwestern Minnesota, we appreciate you guys coming in here. This has been fun. It's been interesting to talk to you guys, so thank you again for coming in.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us.